The abandoned town of Pripyat was once a bustling city of around 50,000 people living their daily lives. But in just one day, it became an eerie ghost town when thousands fled their homes after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And today, 38 years later, not much has changed. So let's take a look at what's left of Pripyat today. We are here at the entrance to the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And behind me is the infamous Chernobyl power plant. And just beyond that is Pripyat, the ghost town, which was evacuated right after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster all those years ago. And as we drive through this checkpoint, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up because we're about to enter one of the most contaminated places on Earth. But first, we need to stop off at the visitor center to get our Geiger counters checked. This machine is going to tell us how much radiation we have picked up on our clothing. And luckily, it looks like we're pretty clean. The person in front of us had a lot more radiation on their clothes than they expected. And I think it's safe to say he's got a bit of a radioactive addiction, because this is probably the third time he's been here. Now, we're allowed into the exclusion zone. We can drive for about 10 minutes before we reach the outskirts of Pripyat. It doesn't really look like a ghost town from this distance. You can see lots of trees and even some cars driving along the road. There's a tram running in the middle of the road. And if we didn't know any better, we might think that it's a normal Ukrainian city. But don't be fooled by its appearance, because this place is a nuclear wasteland. If we zoom out on Google Maps, you can see just how close the power plant is to the edge of town. And that's exactly why everything got contaminated so badly. In fact, Pripyat should never have been built so close to the power station. But the Soviet bosses wanted workers to live as close to the plant as possible. So it was constructed just 2 kilometers away. And when the disaster happened, residents had less than a day to pack up and leave. Most didn't even have time to do that. The evacuation order came in at 1 a.m., and by noon, the city was largely abandoned. Before we go any further, let's talk about radiation levels in Pripyat. It's not like walking into a war zone where there's a clear danger. Radiation isn't something that you can see or hear or feel. And if you walk around Pripyat, you could be near a highly contaminated object without even knowing it. That's why we've brought these 2 Geiger counters with us. We can use them to measure how much radiation there is in certain places. As you can see, outside the city limits, we're getting around 130 microsieverts per hour. That's pretty high, and you can actually hear the Geiger counter clicking away as we speak. When we enter the city, we will have to keep moving to keep our radiation exposure as low as possible. It's hard to imagine that only 38 years have passed since people lived here. It looks so overgrown and dilapidated. But if we head over to the main street and turn the corner, we'll see an abandoned police car left right in the middle of the road. If you look closely, you can see that the tires have almost completely dissolved. But it's still sitting straight in the road, like the officers who were driving it left it moments before evacuating. And as we walk down this street, we're going to pass lots of abandoned cars, most of them Vulcas. These were the Russian cars that most families had in the 1980s. But there's also a Moskvich, a Lada, and even a Mercedes. There's even a fire truck sitting outside the old fire station. And all of these vehicles are still inside the safety zone. So we're allowed to explore them, but we have to be quick because we don't want to pick up too much radiation. Here's a look inside one of the many Vulca cars left behind. And this is what the driver's seat looks like. All the plastic has turned to dust. And if we look on the floor, we can see the remains of the gear stick. Now this car is sitting right in the middle of the street, so it won't be here for much longer. Eventually, they're going to turn this area into a park, and all of these cars will be removed, but other parts of the city will remain off limits forever. Take this apartment block, for example. Back in 2006, part of the roof caved in and it created a radiation hotspot. The levels were so bad that no one dared enter. Even today, robots have to be used to decontaminate areas like this, and it's unlikely that any humans will ever be allowed in again. Just next door, though, there's another building that's somehow even more contaminated. They found a pile of highly radioactive bricks hidden inside this school. Somehow they managed to get lost during the cleanup after the disaster, but they must have fallen out of a truck or been dropped by a crane. Either way, this makes the entire building unsafe, and it's now covered in a protective lead blanket. But it's not just buildings that are dangerous. There's also an abandoned bus sitting on the side of the road, and if you walk up to it, you'll see that it's covered in warning signs. Not only is there high levels of radiation inside this bus, but it's also filled with mercury. That's why the seats have been ripped out. But back in the 1980s, the seats were made of a material called polyvinyl chloride, which contains lots of mercury. It leaches out from the seats and contaminates anything it comes into contact with. So don't even think about sitting down. Not far from the bus, there's another abandoned vehicle that's also off limits, an ambulance. But this one's different because it gives us a glimpse of life after the nuclear disaster. As we open the doors, we can see a gas mask hanging from the ceiling. This was used by emergency workers to protect themselves from the radioactive dust. But this ambulance was never used for its intended purpose. The people of Pripyat had already evacuated by the time this arrived. When we explore Pripyat, it's easy to forget that it was once a thriving city full of life. There were shops, schools, and parks, and all of these places are still here today. But they're all just empty shells. It's strange to think that children used to play here, but now it's too dangerous for anyone to enter. As we continue to walk through the city, we're going to pass this abandoned playground. It looks like a typical playground you'd see in any city. There are swings, slides, and even a climbing frame, but it hasn't been used for over 3 decades. It's hard to imagine kids playing here, but if we listen carefully, we can hear the faint sounds of laughter coming from the nearby forest. Could this be the ghosts of Pripyat playing in the trees? There's another place that I love coming back to again and again, the amusement park on the outskirts of town. But what makes this place so fascinating is the Ferris wheel. It stopped spinning on May the 6th, 1986. And if we travel back in time, we can see what it looked like back then. But when the Ferris wheel was finally turned back on 38 years later, it revealed a sad sight. The seats had disintegrated, and although it looks like the ride is safe to use, it's incredibly dangerous. The metal frame is heavily contaminated, but if you ask me, it's still a great photo opportunity. Although it's incredible to explore all these abandoned places, it's important to remember that this was once a real city, and thousands of people had to leave their homes in a hurry. Many never returned, and it's believed that some of the residents are still missing. That's why it feels wrong to just move on and explore the next room. So, we're going to take a moment of silence to remember the people of Pripyat. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, because it really helps us grow. And make sure to subscribe for more amazing adventures from all over the world.